my sisters and I were small, my mother loved to tell us stories about the characters in her family. The best one by far was about her cousin Janet, who in 1943 left Chicago for the South American colony of British Guyana. In the fall of 1997, Janet called to say that she was going to run for president of Guyana.
Election on me mind that we ain't wasting time. Come, let's shine this light, let's shine the civic light.
What had happened to her during the intervening 54 years? I wondered if the Guyanese people would really elect a 77-year-old American-born Jewish woman for president. Janet grew up down the block from my mother in a typical middle-class Jewish neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. But Janet wasn't a typical Jewish girl.
My earliest memories of Janet is just being enraptured by her. She was very beautiful and very athletic. She always did so many different things. Horseback riding, swimming, nursing. She was swimming. She could have been in the Olympics in 1936 Olympics.
I used to take my allowance and spend it on flying lessons. And when my parents found out, they were very angry at me for flying without telling them and all that.
She was gorgeous, and she must have had all this adulation that anybody that beautiful would have. I know she had a lot of boyfriends when she was growing up, but I don't think it mattered to her.
That's my mother. That's my mother, 1914. She was a good-looking woman. She was a very handsome woman.
What was she like as a mother?
Oh, very good mother. Except on Saturdays when she played mahjong. Every Saturday afternoon, we couldn't do anything. Had to leave her alone with her friends. But no, she was a very good mother.
Her father changed his name from Rosenberg to Roberts to get work in sales or something because he was Jewish and he couldn't get a job.
I always remember the horror or shock. I think 3 or 4 of us were close, very close buddies. And once they started talking about Jews, and I couldn't believe it. I said, but I'm Jewish. And they said, what? And to show that, in other words, to be a Jew was something horrible.
Janet went to Wayne University, which was at that time a very radical university, and supposedly that's when she joined all the radical groups.
While at Wayne State University, Janet got involved in left-wing politics. Soon after that, she met a man who would change the course of her life, a Guyanese student of Indian descent named Cheddi Jagan.
We used to go to movies and things, talk, and he introduced me to his friends. I remember they had, at the University of Chicago, International House, I think it was called, and he took me there once or twice to dances. I remember that.
My uncle Adolph, who was very Republican, used to say, don't ever go to International House. It's filled with communists.
And as I say, we liked one another, and she got married. Very much against my family's good wishes. They didn't like it at all.
Well, her parents were very upset about it. Very, very upset. Because they considered him black. I mean, it was a racist sort of a situation. It was shocking to them. It was a shocking thing she did.
Particularly my parents were dead against it. I suppose for many reasons. One, marrying a foreigner, marrying a person who wasn't white, marrying a person who wasn't Jewish.
My grandmother I think she had a stroke from it, I don't know. And my other aunts who were conservative were afraid to talk to them. By that time, they were Marxists. They were both, Janet were Marxists. And so politically, they were afraid to talk to them. Racially, they were afraid to talk to them. They didn't want to have anything to do with them.
Janet's father was so upset, he threatened to shoot Cheddi on sight. In 1943, Cheddi and Janet left for British Guyana.
When she left, my Uncle Charlie said, she'll be back in a year. She never came back.
Imagine I landed in the river, the Demerara River, on a Pan American seaplane, which no longer exists. Huh? And I often wonder how the seaplane landed. The water's quite rough there. Anyhow, that's how I came here.
Were you scared?
Pardon?
Were you scared in the seaplane? I mean...
No. Nothing much frightens me.
When Janet arrived, British Guyana was the only English colony in South America. The British colonial government controlled all aspects of Guyanese life. The British profited from the rich resources of the colony. They imported people from all over the world to work for them. Mainly, they brought slaves from Africa and indentured servants from India. Cheddi took Janet to meet his parents, who lived and worked on a sugar plantation.
In the sugar estates, women are isolated from men. So when I went there in their little house, the women were sitting in the kitchen and the men were in the living room talking, and they didn't know what to do with me. Eventually, they put me with the men. My presence probably upset a lot of the relationships because the white people in the States were the elite and totally protected, and people just couldn't go and talk to them or anything like that. And here was I in the estate. Created a lot of waves, you know.
Are there any special challenges given that if made president, you would be the first white president as well as the first woman president?
I don't know if people see white when they look at me, except, well, you know, the die-hard politicians. But maybe I'm living in a dream world, I don't know. But I don't feel anything like being a minority. I must seem odd more to outsiders, you know, but I've been around so long. You know, 54 years is a long time.
In the 1997 election, Guyanese of all races turned out in record numbers to exercise their right to vote.
Tonight's going to be the big one.
Yeah.
When we find out.
Yeah.
Try not to be around too late out.
Yeah.
Going to polls, especially in Georgia.
Well, you see, I've been involved in the, one might say, the beginning of politics in this country. Actually, when we came here, there were no political parties. Most of the struggles of people at that period were through the trade union movement. We were trying to organize domestic workers at that time. Workers used to invite us to their sugar estates to discuss their problems and get advice. I think Cheddi was the first man from a sugar estate to become educated. And so they used to invite him all over because they were proud of him and they also wanted him to guide him.
When Comrade Janet came to Guyana, the servants then that was employed by the big shots was being paid 40 cents per week. And she said no, she made a protest. And she said they must be paid $1. Within that same week, everybody was fired. And they came to Janet, and Janet said, no, you hold it. They can't do the work themselves. They will send for you. And within 2 weeks, everybody had a job at $1.
She arrived here in Guyana when it was not what it is today. We didn't have good roads. It was mud dams. And Janet she plugged in that mud coming from a developed country. She could have said then, look, Cheddi, I want to go back to America. She didn't.
Janet's political activities brought her to the attention of colonizers and colonized alike. A Time magazine reporter wrote, "Today, 6 years after her arrival, everybody is either for or against Janet. There is no middle ground."
Could you describe from where this, obviously it's an adopted home country, and this passion and commitment that you have to its people, where the seed for that came from? Is it shortly after, you don't know? any?
I don't know. Some of my strong feelings for those who don't, who are living a hard life probably came from my own experience as a Jew in the United States. And so maybe that feeling of the underdog, maybe the core came from that, I'm not sure.
On June 16, 1948, a critical event took place. British colonial police opened fire on a group of striking workers at Enmore Sugar Plantation. 12 workers were injured. 5 were killed. All of them were shot in the back.
What Enmore meant to Guyana, not just the death of the 5 Enmore martyrs, but what it led to. It led to the movement for freedom and independence in this country. It fired the movement.
In Cheddi's autobiography, The West on Trial, he wrote, "The Enmore tragedy affected me greatly. I was personally acquainted with all the young men killed and injured. The funeral procession, which was led by my wife and myself, became a tremendous mass protest demonstration. There and then, I made a silent pledge. I would dedicate my entire life to the cause of the struggle of the Guyanese people against bondage and exploitation." Outraged by the tragedy at Enmore, Cheddi, Janet, and their comrade Forbes Burnham formed the colony's first political party, the multiracial and Marxist People's Progressive Party, or PPP. Their goal was independence from England.
I am concerned with the economic aspects of socialism, and my feeling is that this is the only thing that's going to solve a backward country's problems. And this is where I stand.
Are you afraid that more conservative powers might try to undermine you?
It is not people like me who are threats to anybody. It's the conditions which are bred in these places. If I am not here, somebody else will arise in my place because of the conditions which have been generated here, which generate themselves in Latin America, in Africa, and elsewhere. Poverty, backwardness, hunger, ignorance. It is necessary to examine what is the cause of these things.
So we were going all around the country, meeting people, talking to people, getting groups formed. And most of these things, I was a secretary. Then I was sort of thrown into publishing news sheets and things like that.
Before in Guyana, women did not have a place in politics. I was a nurse at that time, and I heard Janet Jagan for the first time. And I said, hi to myself, come on, here it is, that we're getting a lift in life.
Not everyone loved Janet. A U.S. reporter wrote, "Janet Rosenberg Jagan is a woman for the U.S. to keep an eye on. She appears to be the ablest communist organizer in the Western Hemisphere. The Jagans dress in rags to work their propaganda among the hungry, ignorant natives. Mrs. Jagan, pretty when she is slicked up, has gone barefoot into cane fields to recruit more communists."
Since in those early days, I think I remember Mrs. Jagan being demonized as being the woman behind Cheddi Jagan, the woman who made him do all kinds of bad things. Cheddi's a good man, but it's she who did that. She's responsible for these.
If you had your chance to be portrayed as you would want to be portrayed, what would you say? What would the headline say? Or
I would maybe it's boastful, but I would define myself as a freedom fighter. That's what I've been doing all the time.
The PPP's first political triumph assured the right of all Guyanese to vote, regardless of gender, class, or race. In the historic election of 1953, Cheddi Jagan, son of a sugar worker, was elected the first communist leader in the Western Hemisphere. My cousin, Janet Rosenberg Jagan, became the country's first female minister and deputy speaker of parliament.
They were in the paper all the time. They were in Time magazine and everything. They compared her to Eva Perón, who was the dictator's wife in Argentina at the same time. And also they said that she was related to Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, who were executed for being communists. She was not related to them. I'm sure she was sympathetic to whatever the truth was.
133 days after Cheddi Jagan took office, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who feared a Red Guyana, sent British troops to the colony. He kicked the democratically elected Jagans out of office.
Into London Airport comes the man around whom revolves the grave situation in British Guiana. Dr. Cheddi Jagan, the deposed Prime Minister of the colony, is here to protest against the government's claim that he and his American-born wife led a plot to make Guyana a communist-controlled state. While reading a prepared statement on the situation, Jagan has Mr. Lyndon Burnham, chairman of the People's Progressive Party, by his side.
In this hour of trial, we appeal to all the liberal-minded, freedom-loving people of Britain to rally to our just cause.
Colonial Secretary Oliver Littleton forthrightly said we could not stand by while British Guiana went communist.
That month, Janet wrote, "Dear folks, received your letter today. Suppose you were still wondering what is happening. On Tuesday, the police raided most of our homes and the party office. The British are real dogs and have shown the world what they really are. What the British have done in bringing troops here and suspending the Constitution is unparalleled in history. There is a rumor that some of us will be arrested. However, it's nothing to worry about." Joe's birthday was yesterday. Had a party and they all had a great time. He liked the atomic gun you sent very much and plays with it all the time. Did I tell you I cut my hair? Looks awful. Love, Janet.